Welcome back, everyone. This is the last final presentation of Webtember for this first week of Webtember. And, well, it's just been terrific. I hope you've been enjoying this. 5 live webinars each Friday starting this week and carrying on all through the month of September. These will be available for you to watch as replays through the end of the month, so don't worry if you didn't get the chance to see them all today. Our fifth and final speaker today is Shannon Combs-Bennett, and she's presenting DNA Matchmaking Made Easy on MyHeritage. Shannon is coming to us live from Virginia, the state of Virginia. And here is a sneak peek at Shannon's syllabus. And actually, I think this one, since this webinar is sponsored by MyHeritage, I think this one is actually free for everyone. So once Shannon gets underway, I'll just verify that because I think that's what the case is for this webinar. But anyways, this is Shannon's 6-page syllabus, and it is right now on the webinar page. I'll put the link in the chat in just a few minutes. Pleased to welcome back to Legacy Family Tree Webinars, Shannon Combs-Bennett. Shannon is the owner of T2 Family History. She is a speaker and author based in Virginia. And Shannon holds a master's in genealogy from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland, and she's working on her PhD from the University of Strathclyde as well. So please join me in putting our virtual hands together to give Shannon Combs-Bennett a nice, warm webinar. Welcome. How are you, Shannon? Welcome to the webinar.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks. Doing okay.
It's great to have you back. Switched over to your screen.
Yeah, let me see here. Let me get my screen up. Doodly-doo. All right.
Excellent.
All right, looks good.
Looks good. Time's all yours.
Awesome. All right. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining in this afternoon. It's always great to have a webinar and make sure that people actually show up. And of course, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today, which is DNA. And with the little twist that we're going to be talking about DNA matching and how to get the most out of the DNA site over on MyHeritage. So just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, I'm going to do a real quick review of the basics of autosomal DNA, make sure that we're all on the same page, like I said, before we get started, because I'm going to refer back to some of the information and terms that I used during the review. I'm going to discuss ethnicity information and, of course, why it varies a little bit from each company. And then go right into the different MyHeritage features. And what we all want to know is exactly how can I put this DNA information to use with my paper genealogy I have that you need to do, or maybe the brick walls and lack of papers that you have for some places. Of course, along the way, I'll be giving you some tips and tricks to using the website, and the information you're going to see are examples from my MyHeritage DNA account. So they're actual screenshots from the company website, just in case you haven't gone out there and explored. That way you'll be able to find your way around a little bit easier. So autosomal DNA is really easy. It's the 50% of the DNA in your body from your mother and the 50% of the DNA in your body from your father. It's not including the X and the Y chromosome, which I will say that at MyHeritage, when you look at the browsers that I'm going to show you, you're going to see that it's only chromosomes 1 through 22. That 23rd pair, the sex-determining chromosomes, aren't shown. So that's why it's a separate little, I mean, obviously they're still there, but they just don't display them for you. So autosomal DNA, you have a confidence level, meaning that you could confidently determine ancestors back using your DNA for about 5 to 7 generations. For most people, that's roughly 200 years. It depends on how short or how long your generations are in your family. So for me, that's about right. For about 5 generations, we're back to the early 1800s, late 1700s. However, I do have one really long generation. My mother's grandfather was born 100 years before her. So because of that, I only get back in that 200-year frame on my maternal line, my mother's line. I actually only go back 3 generations on that line. So like I said, it depends on how short or long your generations are. Um, Autosomal DNA can, of course, lead you to some really interesting leads for your paper genealogy. It's never a matter of if, but a matter of when you're going to come across somebody and you're going to say, huh, oh, I wonder how we match. And then you have to put your little thinking caps on and become a detective. And of course, your cousin matches will vary dependent upon how you inherit that DNA because it changes each generation and we lose a bit each generation. So, what does this mean? What exactly are we talking about? Inheritance and the different, how can we, change, and what is it? Why are we all inheriting different pieces of information? Well, as we go through our life cycle and we're developing the cells that we are going to pass on, they go through this process called recombination, where the chromosomes from our father and the chromosomes from our mother line up in the cell. And I explain it to my children as they give each other a great big hug, and when they pull apart, they've actually exchanged DNA information, bits and pieces with each other. And that's how we get completely unique people. It's the recombination's never exactly the same. You don't know beforehand where things are exactly going to break and what's going to shift around. So unless you're an identical twin, you're not going to have 100% identical DNA to somebody else. You can also kind of think of it as, when you're shuffling a deck of cards, if you separate all the suits out, blacks and reds, and let's say you take all the hearts and all the spades and you shuffle them together and pull them apart. Anytime you do that, you're going to end up with a different combination. The important part is what we're looking at. What makes a match? What makes a DNA match? When a company tells you, oh, you have a cousin match, some people are like, but yeah, but what exactly does that mean? Well, essentially what they are telling you is that you have what's called an IBD segment, or an identical by descent. And that means you and another person have inherited an identical piece of DNA from a common ancestor. Now, the company can't tell you who the common ancestor is. That's up to you and your match to figure out the genealogy part of it. All they know is that, for example, on this slide of these two first cousins, is that they share this identical bit of orange DNA. And if you go back to the parents who are siblings, you can see that that orange spot comes from their father, or these first cousins' grandfather. And through the process of recombination, so that shuffling of the deck in random ways, they have ended up inheriting this piece of orange, quote unquote orange, DNA. And that's how they have identical by descent. That's how they have in common pieces of DNA given to them. And then these pieces can be big, they can be small, they can be broken out throughout the chromosomes. They don't have to just be on one chromosome, they can be all over from 1 through 22. And obviously, the more DNA you have in common with somebody, typically the closer you are related to that person. Now, I'm going to put a caveat out there, because if you have multiple lines in common with somebody, that's going to influence how much ancestral DNA you and that person have in common. And this is really a problem for people who come from endogamous populations. So for example, Ashkenazi Jewish populations, Amish, Mennonite, Pacific Islander. It could be, it doesn't have to be just religious groups of people is what I'm saying. It could be people who are geographically isolated. They could be people who are culturally isolated, religiously isolated, ethnically, whatever. But people who come from a community who have typically where they don't intermarry outside of the community for long periods of time. That can influence the amount of DNA. Sometimes, especially if you're from, for an example, colonial America, I have several lines in common with a friend of mine, and we show up in each other's DNA matches. And we're talking significantly back in time, early 17, late 1600s, but because we have so many genealogy ancestral lines in common, we can actually see those pieces come up. Now, obviously, she shows up as a distant cousin, but they're there. An example more recently is I always teased my mom that her family moved to Martin County, Indiana, and they never left. It's like they didn't know that they could cross the county lines because everybody is related to everybody. And I had a match come across 7, 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. I lose track of time, it seems, as I get older. But I had a person come across, and he was coming across as a first, second cousin match. And I'm an only grandchild on that side of the family. So at first I was like, do I need to call my uncles and say, is there something you want to confess to? But what turns out is at that time, looking at our tree, we discovered that we had a second great set of great-grandparents and 2 third great-grandparents. So we had 3 ancestral lines in common. And then over the years, we've upped that now to 5 ancestral lines. So because we had so many common ancestors, it increased the quote-unquote cousin relationship that we had. It wasn't able to tell me just on one line, right? Because they're going by the total amount. The computer isn't, breaking out that, oh, this could be multiple lines. No, it's like, oh, you have this much DNA, you fall within this possible relationship. So just remember, if you start getting something that you're like, oh, that's really close, or I wonder how this person could exactly be related to me. If they're not falling into the expected grandparents, don't jump to it's an unknown parentage or adoption or those types of things. It could be that you have multiple lines in common. So make sure you look at all possibilities. And there's one other thing is, and just because somebody doesn't show up as a match to you and when you think they should, remember, once again, go back to the card deck. Not everybody inherits the same DNA from the ancestor couple as you do, or they might inherit a different portion than you did, or maybe in a different combination or percentage, because you have a lot of fourth cousins in your genealogy tree, but then in your genetic family tree, you're not going to have as many show up. All right, so real quick, because I'm also going to discuss ethnicity results at MyHeritage, I wanted to make sure that we covered this because a lot of people love taking DNA tests to find out, quote unquote, what are they? And then sometimes get confused or a little upset by the results. So you might see ethnicity results in DNA testing come across in, ethnicity. Sometimes people call it admixture. Sometimes you might see it as a biogeographical estimate. And those are all the same thing. There's different terminologies for essentially the same thing. It's referring to how a company or a scientist assigns information to your DNA to give you a quote unquote ethnicity, and it's based on the company's reference population. So they're comparing you to a set of people that they have determined are from that geographic region. Now, just like autosomal DNA and cousinship, you're only going to get the information that you have inherited, okay? So you may know you are XYZ, but maybe only X and Z show up. And some people get very upset. They're like, no, 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 I have it on paper. I am Y. I am Y. Why isn't this showing up? Well, it could simply be because you didn't inherit that information from your family. Doesn't mean that you're not. You have it on paper, you have it genealogically, you know the people came from that area. So yeah, you're from there. It just means that you didn't inherit that little piece of DNA. And so remember, just like autosomal DNA, the more distance the relationship, the less of the chance that you're actually going to inherit that piece of information. They're inherited differently, and even siblings can have completely different ethnic charts come across. I blanked on the word for a second, sorry. It always amazed my father when he looked at his results compared to his brother and his sister, because his brother and his sister have almost identical ethnicity charts. And my father looks like he's some adopted child that they picked up on, as he put it, picked up from the side of the road, because he completely did not match them. Now, when you look at their autosomal results, it's obviously they're full siblings. It comes across as that, but they didn't inherit the same combinations. And there's always limitations depending on the company and the way the company defines and creates these reference populations. So here's an example from MyHeritage of my ethnic background. You can see that they have me as 3 main groups: Scandinavian, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, and then Iberian with some West Asian thrown in. And then there's also genetic groups, and we'll talk about these here in a minute also. Where I'm showing up is Midwestern, Northeastern, Midwestern, Kentucky, and etc. So let's look at this a little bit further. So I find it interesting. Each company I tested is a little bit different, but I have the same general information. I know from my genealogy that I am mostly from the British Isles. I have a lot of German in me, and the only thing I can think of is that the way that the reference populations are shifting is that it's because it's Northern Germany and Danish. So Northern Europe it's falling into that Scandinavian percent. And believe it or not, the Iberian and the West Asian, that's part of my Irish heritage, because my most recent ancestors who immigrated from Ireland in the 1800s, they came from Galway, and Galway has had a long, well over 500-year trading history with Spain and the Mediterranean, and a large population of people who still live there today. And this is from information I received from the Galway Museum and their Heritage Center. They still have a lot of, as they put it, Latin heritage from intermarriage with the sailors and people coming and going as a trading port. And so when I told her these results, she's like, oh yes, that you fit in here. What's sad to me is that I received this from my father. That's his ancestral line. And when I looked at my children, I have 2 sons. One of my sons had none of this, but the other one did. So in one generation, we've lost it. And my dad, his siblings don't have this, so their children didn't inherit any of that information. So it just gets smaller and smaller each generation. And then, like I said, we have genetic groups there, and you can sort them from high to low confidence level. I like the groups because it tells you information about how people migrated to those different areas and the genetic information that they have in common with each other. Especially if you get stuck on a match, you can see if they have the same genetic group as you, and see if that can help figure out where they may have come from, where they may have settled, where their ancestors were from. And it may be as simple as you share a common heritage, and then it's up to you to figure out how that could be. The other nice thing is you can read a little bit more about the ethnicities. So here's the three of the ones that I had. You can also see your DNA matches through that have the exact same ethnicity shared as you. And for some people, especially if you're dealing with unknown parentage or a brick wall and you don't really know a lot, if you have a more unusual ethnicity, so for me, that would be the Iberian or the West Asian, compared to my overwhelmingly British Isles / Scandinavian. I'm going to see if anybody else has that. Because for me, I know exactly now which family line that came from. And if someone is sharing West Asian Iberian with me, that could give me a clue that they're from my Irish Brennan and Gerhardy lines, or Garrity, sorry. It might not, but it could give me a clue to start with. And sometimes you just need a starting point. It may not be right, but you got to do something, because otherwise you're going to beat your head against the wall trying to figure this out. And like I said, they have groups. I click on the group. It will pull up information about the places where people who have matched where they currently live, where they used to live. You can see information about moving around the country, who settled in that area. And you can see for this one, Midwestern USA is British and German and Irish. Well, that's me. There you can see how many, kits there are. And this one is a high confidence level. I only had 2 really high confidence level groups. Both of them were the Midwestern ones. Go figure. I am from Indiana. That's, right smack dab in the middle there. The other ones were less confident, but they overlapped a lot. So it would make sense why they would show up as a possible genetic group for me. And like I said, sometimes this can give you ideas of a place to start, especially if you don't have a starting spot at the company to figure out how you might be related to somebody. Okay, so let's delve into DNA matches. Now, I updated all of the MyHeritage slides I had earlier this week. So I wanted to make sure I had the most the most recent information out here for you, because sometimes, you log into a website after a while and you're like, oh, there's a different font, or look, there's a different graphic. So important to have good slides, right? And you can see that I currently have 16,000 matches, and this is what the main menu looks like when you pop up on it. It'll give you a little bit of a breakdown, and you can scroll down the page and look at different information. That one close family there, that's my father. My mother, unfortunately, I was not able to get her tested before she passed. And my father passed away almost a year ago now. So I'm really happy that I was able to get him in here. And that's an important thing, is if you're doing testing, is to make sure if you're able to get the people who are the oldest members of your family first, it pushes that 5 to 7 generations back a little bit more. Now that I'm the oldest generation, I was happy I was able to get that for somebody else. So I have 10 extended family, and those are first, second, third cousins, roughly, and then distant relatives is honestly anybody low third cousin, fourth, fifth, and beyond. So that's where you start getting those really high numbers, because sometimes it may just be, oh, you're from the same area, you have common ancestors that go back a ways. You may not be able to confidently determine how you're related to them. It may just be that you're from the same ethnic pool in some cases. All right, so let's look at how you can do this. So when you're looking at the DNA matches, the first thing you're going to notice is you have all different ways to sort. So you can sort your matches by tree details. And we're going to go through each of these in a little bit. The theory of family relativity, if they have what's called a smart match, you can do shared surname. That's a great way to see if they have a tree, and if you have a tree on MyHeritage, they can see if there's a surname in common. Also, if you have a shared location, sometimes you might have a surname, but oh, look at that, you have 4 generations in the same town. I wonder. You can also do relationships, close, extended, distant, locations. So these are the locations the tester is from. And yes, I have somebody from New Zealand, so that was kind of exciting to me. You can also do ethnicities, um, genetic groups, so which we just kind of discussed. Sometimes you can go in there and see if somebody is, has that weird, for me, the more exotic Iberian Peninsula or West Asian. You can start to label, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. You can star them as your favorite matches. And then for me, I created labels for each of my grandparents' lines. So I have Armstrong, Arvin, Brennan, and Combs. And that way, when I find a relationship and I myself confirmed it to where I'm satisfied, I color code my matches. So then I can say, okay, I want to do research on this line. So let's say the Arvin family line. And I click on that and it brings up all the matches that I have confirmed are from that grandparent. You can also sort by, this is right now the default is shared DNA, but you can also do shared segments. So where they have confirmed that you have a portion of DNA in common. Largest DNA that you have, largest segments, if you know the person's name, or just by most recent. Sometimes we come out here, it's been a few months, so you don't want to have to page through. You just click on most recent and it'll pull up the ones that have within the last few weeks that have been added. So you can get oh, look, here are the 20 that have come in the last 2 weeks, or etc. Okay, and then the last one, the little magnifying glass, if you know a person's name and you want to go right to them, or you're looking for a surname that maybe they don't have in common, or you're trying to see if there's a genealogical link to somebody else, doesn't even have to be a surname that you have. You can put it in, and if the person has a family tree and that surname is in the family tree, they'll pull those up for you. Okay, so let's look at one of my matches and go through what this all means. So I'm looking at one of my matches, and I know him, and I did send him an email to ask if this was okay. But we're going to pretend that I don't know him. And I'm going to show you how my first time through, how I would go about doing all the analysis. So I have the person's name, where they're from. If I want to contact them, I would simply click the contact button here at right there where it says contact Gregory Sims. They give me an estimated relationship and all sorts of other information. Of course, I want to draw your attention here where you have labels. So that little square, if I decide to label that person with one of my grandparents' lines, I would change that color. I can also favorite it. And then what I really like is there's a notes feature. So if you want to put notes on a match, it could be anything you discover, any questions you have, something that doesn't seem right to you, something you want to follow up on. Some people even use that as a contact log. And add other information to it, especially if you start emailing each other. So that would be really good. Then you can also hear, like I said, this is the table, okay, of probabilities of how you might be related to somebody. And I'm going to show you the table here in a minute. If you click on it, it actually brings up a chart for you, which is really nice for people who are visually oriented. It's all based on the amount of shared DNA. So once again, if you have more than one shared ancestral line, remember that could be inflated. This is information about how you share DNA in common. So if you click on the little question mark inside the circle, it'll tell you what does that mean? What does DNA match quality mean according to MyHeritage? So we have 1% DNA in common, or 67.1 centimorgans, and that's the total number. And then across all 22 chromosomes, we have 6 shared segments, with our largest being 20 centimorgans. So that's a pretty big chunk, 20 centimorgans. This information is the summary from the family tree, and you have to get this information. Your match and you both have to have a family tree on MyHeritage. And I'm going to keep saying that because some people were like, well, how do you get this information? It comes from one, the information you input, and two, the information they input. So caveat about family trees are double check, double check, double check, because some people, you don't know another person's quality of information or where they got it. So of course you have to be a little bit careful, but it gives you a clue. It gives you a starting spot. And then you can go right out to the person's tree if you're interested in starting there. And some people like to do that when they see a DNA match and there's a view tree option. They click on the tree first so that they can kind of do a cursory glance. Oh, is there anything here that looks like I might be related, or how I might be able to hone in a little bit more before I go in and look at the DNA itself. All right, so when you click on his name or your match's names, one of the first thing that pops up on the page as you scroll down is the theory of family relativity. And this is, some other companies have similar databases, but this is the MyHeritage way. And it can give you really good clues and sometimes surprising information. It is, of course, once again, based on you and the person having a family tree. So if you go to somebody's site and you're like, where's the theory of family relativity? Why isn't it showing up? Well, make sure that, that person does have a family tree after all. So what I like is you can confirm on this if it's correct, or if you know that this theory is wrong, you can reject it. And the computer will take that into account and make corrections and note it, and it'll be better next time. So it's really user driven, and you need to help. I like to say, if you're going to use the tool, help participate in making the tool better. So as you go through here, take a moment and see if you can confirm or reject. If you can't, either way, of course, leave it alone. So according to this, it says that Greg and I are related on my mother's side of the family and his father's side of the family, back to our common ancestors, Josephus Sanders and Mary Ellen Wildman. Okay, well, that's awesome. I do have those people in my family tree. I am confident that that is my line because that's what I put in and what I researched. I do know that my great-grandmother did have a sister named Hester, so that's entirely possible. So I think I need to look at this a little bit better. And they have another path, because if you look up at the top, where this purple button up here, it says View Full Theory. If you click on that, it takes you to the next page, and it shows me the two different paths. Path 1 was the one we just saw, and this is path 2. And it tells us, compared to family search, so the one tree or the big universal tree that they're putting together at family search, how it compares and how it thinks. So it's saying it's 100% that compared Greg there with Hester, they're confident with that. Now, for some reason, it's only 92% it thinks for me. I have to figure out why Family Search thinks my 100% correct tree is only 92, but it could be any number of reasons from other people putting odd information. I do know some people on some of the family trees, they think my great-grandmother's name isn't Isla with an L, but it should be Ida with a D, and I'm not sure why, but so needless to say, I went through and confirmed that this is a correct theory, because I went and did the quick research, and yes, this is all true. When you scroll down a little bit further, you get the possible relationships. So it thinks that he and I have a 41% chance of being third cousins, so a third great-grandparent. So let's go back out here. So this is actually my second great-grandparents and his great-grandparents. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means that one, I'm a generation down. So him and my mom are second cousins. Um, so there's a little bit of distance, right? So it's a little bit 32% chance of being second cousins, and then it goes down from there. And once again, what I said, I like how it says if you click here, it'll show you the diagram. I am a very visual learner. I like seeing how in chart form I draw pictures all the time. So it actually puts it out. So if you're looking at this and you're like, I don't know what the heck that means, third cousin. I can never remember which grandparent that could be from. This pulls it out for you, okay? So there I am all the way down here at the bottom. And then it thinks that these are the 5 possible relationships that I could share with my match. And if you have no earthly idea how you might be related to somebody, this can be a godsend, because now you have, oh, well, if I go up that line and over, let me see who are my great grandparents, or who are my third great grandparents. Now, genealogically, I know that that's not correct. It's my great great grandparents and it's his great, but it's giving me an idea of how I can find myself. And he will be right here. That's where he falls in line for me. Okay. So next one. All right. So as you scroll down, you can also find shared surnames. Some really good ideas here if you're not really sure how people might be related to you, or if you start seeing surnames pop up and they're first names you've never heard of, definitely look to see how they might be related or if they're even close. My married name is Bennett, but I have a couple Bennetts in my family tree. And some computer algorithms like to throw in, oh, you could be related to this person. It's like, no, not by blood, because you know how many Bennetts there are out there in the world. And I know my husband's Bennett family, and when they immigrated here in the late 1800s, and I'm like, no, I'm not related to anybody named Bennett from the 1700s that on his side of the family. So sometimes it can be a little bit confused, but when you need a place to start, once again, it's a great place. So all of these are people that MyHeritage shows that we share DNA. Me and Gregory and this person share DNA. And once again, you got those labels there. So if I've already gone through and identified how somebody could be related to me on one of my ancestral lines, I got a color coding. As long as they're all the same color coding, it makes it really easy because I've just narrowed down which of my 4 family grandparent lines it could be. If I start getting multiple color codings, well, then I might be dealing with, could still be only one ancestral line. We could all, depending on how we're related, it could go, my grandparents could be related in some odd manner, or we could be dealing with a multiple ancestor situation, like I mentioned earlier. The other thing here is these little buttons that you see off to the side. That means the computer says that you have a triangulated segment. So that means the 3 of you, triangle 3, have a piece of DNA in common between the 3 of you. So that's a really good sign of being from the same ancestor, because that would have obviously passed down through the generations intact and identifiable. So for example, Ava, Gregory, and I share this piece of DNA on our 11th chromosome. The DNA that Greg and I share is red, and you can see that I actually share a lot more DNA with Ava, so that yellow part goes on a lot further. And it could be that even though it says that we only share I think that's actually the 15 centimorgans that she and I share are right there. That's it on the entire thing, because we only share 0.2% of our DNA. But it's a nice big chunk. And so what I want to know is, and I would want to investigate, is who else shares that chunk of DNA on our 11th chromosome? Because as long as Greg and I only have the Sanders-Wildman ancestral couple in common, it could be, well, to me, it should be, the only ancestor couple that Ava and I should share are Josephus Sanders and Mary Ellen Wildman. That is where that DNA had to have come from. There's also at the bottom of the page a chromosome browser. So this shows all the different portions of DNA that Gregory and I share in common. That shows up there as purple. And you can see we have that one segment I just talked about on chromosome 11, but we also have DNA on 6, 8, 14, and then 2 portions on 15. And number 15, chromosome 15 makes me a little excited, because to get portions like that, that means I've inherited through my mother a longer segment of DNA, most likely. And it's showing me the recombination patterns with the ancestral DNA. Because theoretically, it should be all one line, but somewhere along the way, chromosomes have exchanged information, and now either I or Gregory are missing that center portion of chromosome 15 from the ancestral lineage. So that to me was, when I saw that, I was like, ooh, that's an example of recombination somewhere along the way, because you get that nice little break there. Okay, there's also advanced options. And these can come in really handy, especially if you like doing the leads method, or you like to keep DNA segments on spreadsheets for your own analysis offline, so not at the company. This will download these results from MyHeritage. And what it shows up is you get the name and the match name, what chromosome, and then the start and end information. So you can put this into other programs. You can do your own analysis, like I said, through the leads method, or whatever method you've developed to color code, sort, analyze. But it can really give you pinpoint accuracy to exactly how you and a person match and where exactly the DNA is from on your chromosomes. Okay, so the other thing is, like I said, I like to make notes. Notes are good. So this is, so I don't have to in the future go back in to see exactly how, if I just need a refresher. I made the simple note. His grandmother and my maternal grandmother's mother were sisters. So far I know of one common set of ancestors, Josephus Sanders and Mary Ellen Wildman. So I starred him because he's a pretty close match. And then I put him down as my maternal grandmother's line, which is in my labeling is that orange dot. Okay, so let's talk about a few extra tools that are there. We've gone through that entire match page, but there's some other ways that you can analyze DNA at MyHeritage, which I personally like and want to make sure that you do too. So first of all, there is a one-to-many chromosome browser available. So as you start gathering information and looking at your matches, you can look how you and up to 7 other people from your match list share DNA information. And it'll put it out on one browser for you. So if you're trying to say that, yes, I think these people are from the same ancestral line, or hey, I want to see how we share DNA because we keep showing up in the same matches, but I'm not quite too sure how that looks. This is a perfect way to put it all into one picture. And then what I do is, if I'm going to compare multiple groups of people, is I actually take a screenshot. so that I can then put the pictures next to each other on my computer, so I can see them all at the same time and kind of do a visual overlay if you have more than 7 people that you're trying to look at one point in time. So for example, I pulled up these 7 people. They all share, they all come up as matches with me and Greg. And I wanted to see how that some of them have triangulation, some of them don't. So I wanted to see where we all looked compared to each other, right? So once again, Greg is the red lines as we go down. And then we have Ava, who had that triangulated segment. She's orange, which you can see there on chromosome 11. Now, I only picked out the chromosomes here. You can see there's not 1 through 22. If I did that, they'd be so teeny tiny. So I only pulled out the ones where we actually share DNA, so it's actually a good size for everybody. And what some of the interesting things just by looking at this that I've seen is one on chromosome 4, the yellow and the blue match. It didn't show up as a triangulated match anywhere, but they do overlap the slightest little bit. Now, that could just be coincidence, could be 2 completely different lines, but seeing as these people all show up as a shared DNA match between me and Gregory, to me, that means that that is part of the same, most likely the same DNA came down from the ancestral couple, but it got broke there at some point in time on somebody. So I have that entire big piece. So where the yellow and the blue is, that is one piece of DNA for me. But somewhere along the line, it got only portion of it got transported, came down through descent to those 2 people. The other interesting part is there are some more overlaps. You can see once again on 11, there's some more on 14. So like I said, Rebecca and Rachel Ann segments slightly overlap. So I think it's possibly one long line for me, but the other alternative is that it could be 2 separate lines. So my DNA is like they could keep going, like their pieces could be longer, but we only match at those segments because they're from 2 different people. Here at number 11, we have Gregory, Ava, and Diane all match. Now, if we look, Ava and Diane, they have the same surname. I don't know their relationship. They're the exact same size. So it could be a mother and daughter. It could be siblings. It could be first cousins with it being that big. But that's a nice, great big chunk of DNA that has come down. And then on number 14, chromosome 14, we have a nice overlap between Greg and a man named Charles Austin. And they overlap a significant portion. So once again, for me, because Gregory and him match, and he and Charles and I match to me, that says that I have that whole big piece from the beginning of the red to the end of the blue. And it's showing a nice overlap with my ancestral DNA. So I inherited that great big piece for some reason, and they only inherited small portions because of recombination. But to me, that's a good sign that the 3 of us definitely have an ancestral couple in common together, just like Ava and Diana and Gregory and I do. And since I've only been able to identify one ancestral couple, it has to be them. It has to be the Sanders-Wildman line. So what do? I'd go out and I would download that Excel data and then start seeing exactly where the start and stops are and see if we can identify and pinpoint that information. Now, there's also autoclusters, and autoclusters are fascinating. It's a way that they've, I can talk, MyHeritage organizes your matches into groups for you. It's taking all of your matches. And so instead of just looking at 7, right, it's looking at the everybody you have and grouping those people together. And then you can look at that data and start pulling them apart and putting them through the chromosome browser and looking at their profiles. When you generate an auto clusters, you get these 3 files at the top. The nice PDF explaining how to understand your results. It is a must read. You also get an Excel file of all the information, a CVS. And then if you click on the website, it takes you to the next thing. And that's actually the auto cluster yourself. So this is my auto cluster. And you can see that there are distinct colors and groupings of people. The gray dots are the outliers. It's where the computer was like, I can't quite figure out how this person and this person, they don't match. So if we look at the top line there and we come across and there's, this person at the top whose name is Elizabeth, matches a whole bunch of different people, but then there's this outlier where she matches, but not quite able to figure out a group to put that person in, okay? And then you can go down from there. So what I do is I take the people's names and then I go and I look them up. I go and I look at them together, analyzing and comparing the chromosome browser and look at their family trees, but it gives me a place to start again because I know somehow we're all related to each other. I just have to figure out how. And that's where the fun is, right? In genealogy. You can also sort and look at all this different information. You can click, this is at the bottom of the website under the auto cluster. Click on the name to go to that person's match profile. You can sort by all sorts of different information to find what you're looking for. So if you want to go by specific names, if you want to look at large segments first, you want to look at at a specific cluster first. Since not everybody can read those teeny tiny little names, you can look by the clusters and it'll put them all together for you in a nice little grouping. You can also click here, these highlighted numbers, that's the number of people they have in their tree. So you can click on that and go directly to their family tree. So real quick, let's review before we move on. So once again, MyHeritage right now, it's only autosomal DNA testing, which is fine, gives you a lot of really great information. You can get full ethnicity and groups to look at, can narrow down some ideas there. Definitely use the label favorite and make notes on these different profiles. It's very frustrating sometimes when you know you've looked at something and you know you made a conclusion, but you can't find that little Post-it note you wrote it down on. So put those Post-it notes digital and put them on the match directly. Definitely sort through the different features. Make your life easier so you don't have to hunt through pages and pages and pages. Make a note, make a label, make a surname file, and look for those places and sort. And then, of course, use the chromosome browser and then Excel information together. It can give you the Excel information can give you better, more accurate information on exactly how you and another person are related to each other. So on that note, I'll turn it back over to Marion.
Thank you, Shannon. That was a very thorough presentation on all the different parts. I didn't realize you were going to cover ethnicity as well, so that was nice. I know currently they are updating their ethnicity results for a lot of people, so some people can't even see their ethnicity results right now. I know mine have come through, but all my other kits have not. So some people might be experiencing that. Let's see. I do have one question before I'm going to do the announcements and stuff. I have other question, but let me just ask you this one here. Patriva, she says she doesn't have the ethnicities or genetic groups filter options. Do you know why that would happen?
No.
Is it because she doesn't have enough matches in that particular groups for it to appear or something?
Well, it shouldn't matter about matches. Because the ethnicity results are just based on comparing your DNA data to the reference populations that MyHeritage uses to determine that information. So it's completely separate from the matching issue. The only thing I can think of is that it's not up there yet. If it's like a new test, or they are updating it and the update hasn't come through. But yeah, everybody should have ethnicities up there. The groups are different. It may just be that you don't have enough information to fall within one of their defined groups, but they
Mm-hmm.
are adding new groups as well. So there might be more information coming, more
Yeah.
groups where you would actually fall into.
I didn't even realize that the genetic groups were there until you had mentioned it in your presentation. Then and I went and I looked and I'm like, oh, I do have these groups. And but you have to look at them closely because they do have like high confidence, low confidence,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I agree with the ones where they say high confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the low confidence there might be a connection, but it's more of a stretch. It's not like a strong
Right.
group for me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I have 2 at high and 9 at low.
Ah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
All right, why don't you sit back for a minute? Let me do these announcements, and then I've got one or two questions here. If anybody else has a question, pop it in the chat, and we'll have Shannon back on in just a second. All right, we have made it through week 1 of Webtember, 5 webinars in one day. It's been a great day. All the classes will be free through the end of September. After that, they'll be available in our member library. And all of the handouts are available to our members. If you want to join, you can use this code here, Webtember23, and you'll get 20% off a membership. And that coupon code is good through the end of September as well. So September is a very special month here at Legacy Family Tree Webinars. If you'd like to see more DNA webinars, we have 260. We do a lot of DNA here at Legacy. So just go to familytreewebinars.com/DNA, and that will bring you to all of our DNA webinars. We also have our Foundations in DNA series, which is 5 webinars these are your foundational webinars that are going to help you understand what DNA is all about. And these are really good as a review, or if you're brand new to DNA, you might want to check these out and go to DNA 1 to get those. And other MyHeritage webinars in the Legacy Library. If you're MyHeritage member and you want to learn more about all the different services and things that they offer, just go to /MyHeritage to reach those. And Shannon has 12 other webinars in our Legacy Library. And let's see here. She has webinars on all sorts of different topics. So she's got one here on databases, published genealogy, strategies for using family search, obituaries, Virginia, Library of Congress, American Memory Collection. She has also one, I think she's got 2 webinars on heraldry as well. So lots of great stuff there from Shannon. So definitely go check that out. All right, we have one last door prize to give away today, and this, appropriately enough, is going to be a MyHeritage DNA test kit, and that is going to go out to Susan Para Rojas. So congratulations, Susan. We will be in touch with you on how you can get your DNA kit. And again, that coupon code Webtember, I will put that again in the chat if you'd like to use that. So basically, you're taking the word Webtember23 and you put that in the coupon code box when you check out and when you're purchasing a membership, and then it'll take 20% off. All right, let's see here. Okay, Shannon. Leslie is asking, do you have any advice for someone who has endogamy from the same group on both sides of the family?
Oh. Patience. Lots and lots of patience. Unfortunately, it can be very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with several people who have had this situation on one and both sides of their family. And you have to realize that a large number of your matches are going to be so far back in time, you may never figure it out. Um, so you have to kind of be patient and go through one match at a time, starting at the top, and figure out if it's a close match, who else you have large DNA segments in common with. I would rely on triangulation a little bit more. Um, there's a couple really good books out there on doing they're targeted towards Ashkenazi Jewish populations, but the search strategies are the same for anybody who has large endogamy issues in their family. Um, but yeah, it's going to get comfortable with spreadsheets and look at the how exactly you're related to somebody. See if you can look at those triangulated portions and have an idea. That also may be where you want to look at where the matches live. See if you can find clusters of people and look at their trees. You may not be able to do it by surname, especially if it's a lot of the same surnames over and over and over again with the endogamy, but you may be able to go by looking at ancestral locations and see if people are coming from the same communities. Are they migrating in the same areas? And if those migration patterns are the same as yours. But patience and time, lots of time.
Let's see here. Okay. Well, here's a quick one from Dennis. He's asking, is genetic group something extra you have to pay for? And I'm just really mentioning this for clarification. This should just be.
No, it should just come straight.
Yeah.
If you have the information, it should be right there underneath of your ethnicity results.
Yeah, maybe just scroll down. Hopefully you'll see it. And if not, maybe wait till after this ethnicity update that they're in the middle of.
Yeah.
Christine wants to know, how do you deal with incorrect theory of relativity, except, besides rejecting it? Is there any way to deal with it?
So what I usually do is if I see that it's like really wrong or if it's a really simple error, usually people, if you send them an email or a note and say, hey, we're a match, blah, blah, blah. I was looking and I have this document that says XYZ. Most people will go, oh, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And we'll correct it. Mm-hmm. If it's a huge one, sometimes you just kind of have to brace for I'm going to go in and I'm going to disrupt somebody's family tree and type out a really nice letter saying, I saw your tree, or, we have a common, not only DNA match, but looks like ancestral couple. Because you can't fix somebody else's tree, but you can make suggestions and back up your information with sources, especially if you have a document that shows something that is contrary to what they have out there. Unfortunately, you have to leave it in their court. But what I also do is I make a note on that person's profile on my match list saying that, I contacted them. Yes, I think we're a genetic match, and this is how I think we're a match, but, just a note that the tree they have is incorrect. I usually put a date with it. That way I know when the last time, I wrote them on this date to see if they would correct it. But that's essentially all you can do is you can hope and fingers crossed that oh, wow, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Oh, of course, I'll go out and correct it. Unfortunately, people are people. And believe it or not, I have had knockdown, drag out arguments with people who ultimately refused to change something because they just knew they were right. And I was uppity and wrong. So, but yeah, make a note, reject it, because that's the way the computer learns. And then I would write to them and, say, hey, I think I think you made a mistake. this is what I have found. Try to do it politely, and hope you can put out a dialogue.
All right, so let's see. Two interesting ones here. Let's take
Sure.
the easier one first, I guess. So Teresa's saying 6 out of 8 of my great-grandparents were immigrants to the U.S., so there don't seem to be as many DNA matches as the lines that are pre-Revolutionary War. Are there strategies for people like me? But before you answer that,
Hmm.
Shannon, I would just like to ask Teresa, are those matches on Ancestry or on MyHeritage? Because if they're on MyHeritage, I would think you have a lot. Their base is Europe's, so I would assume that you would have more matches, that the pre-revolutionary people are really strong on Ancestry. But anyway, sorry. Take it away,
Okay.
Shannon.
No, actually, 'cause that's a really good point. MyHeritage tends to have a stronger base in Europe. Now, once again, the American love of genealogy and DNA is starting to eclipse that a little bit. We do have there are a lot of American participants in the MyHeritage database, but they do have strong, I know, German, Eastern European, all over the British Isles. If they can get a test in somebody over there, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the only thing I can think of is unfortunately, sometimes it can just be a matter of wait. Uh, it could take, you never know, one, where somebody's going to test, when they're going to test, or even why somebody wants to test. So it can sometimes just be a matter of wait to see if the right person pops up at the right time. Um, because, I mean, if you're looking at European ancestry, this really is the company to test with. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, my
yeah,
strongest matches are all European on MyHeritage,
yeah.
from all of my immigrant ancestry. So I'm just surprised by that. But
Yeah, me too. Um, I mean, my most recent ancestors that immigrated over here were that Irish line from Galway, and they were here 1855, 1856. So I don't have any quote unquote recent matches, so I depend a lot on my American. But I have found, and I do have matches in MyHeritage from Germany, because I
mhm.
had German ancestry that came over about the same time. And I have found some Irish matches too. So, which aren't in any other database. And
Mm,
I'm in all of them.
yeah, yeah, it is very interesting how different representation you get at each testing site
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
matches. It's like some people stick to just exactly one site, and you won't find them anywhere else. But
Right. Right.
all right, now for that bigger question. Now, this question could actually be a full webinar, but it's a really
Hmm.
interesting question. So I really
Hmm.
I want to put it out there into the universe so that you can start thinking about it. Everybody can start thinking about this. And this question comes from Anne. She says, "Can you recommend a way to document your DNA matches so that you can work across websites?" That's is like the big problem for everybody these days.
It is a big problem. And yes, yes, it is a big problem. Believe it or not, there used to be a software program out there, free program
Hmm.
called Genomate Pro that would do this, but it hasn't been updated in like 5, maybe 6 years. So it's really out of date, and it's because it's so far out of date, you can't use it anymore. Um, the only thing that I can recommend, and this is, I am a spreadsheet geek. So when all else fails, I turn to my spreadsheets. And that's really the only way I've been able to do it, is by putting all of my matches, especially if I can download the segment start and stop data. And obviously, making all of the, transferring the data so they fall into the same columns, and it takes some time and work. You have to be like really bored or watching a long movie and not care. Um, and put in the match note which company it came from, start stop information, etc. Size of segments, centimorgans, blah blah blah, and then literally just do that for everyone you're interested in matching. And then you're gonna end up with one huge sheet, but you can then sort by chromosome number. You can then sort by segment start stop number. You can do a whole bunch of different stuff within your spreadsheet. It's time consuming and tedious, but there's nothing out there. So if there are any computer programmers out there, and my husband's a programmer and I have been on him for a decade. Of course, he says, do you want me to make money or do you want me to make toys? So money is always good. It feeds my children. But if there's anybody out there who has spare time, this is a market. Okay. And people would love you. They would pay this.
And there are a couple suggestions here. Let's see, Pat has mentioned Airtable as says Airtable works well to document and organize DNA matches. Neil says Genome Mate Pro is now GDAT. Okay. And I wanted to also mention Morris Gleason, who has done a couple webinars for Legacy. He has this little Excel spreadsheet, and he has he has this very clever way of combining from the different sites. And if you go to his webinars on the Legacy site, he has a link to his spreadsheet. So
he's a great guy.
Yes, he is. And I've used his spreadsheet actually when I did an adoption case recently, and it worked really well actually. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for today. Shannon, thank you so much for taking us through the MyHeritage DNA, all the results and everything in the ethnicity. That was great. All right. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and especially for those of you who stuck around for all 5 webinars. We will be back next Friday with 5 more webinars, but we do have 2 webinars coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday, just to mention it. We have our Down Under webinar, and then we have our regular webinar Wednesday, and Michelle Leonard will be here actually talking about DNA as well. So it's going to be a lot of learning next week. So hope to see you all there. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.